Welcome back, everyone. I am, as usual, Garrett Weinzerl, and my guest today, oh man, there's so much to talk about. He is a billboard-topping comedian. He is a podcaster. He is a game maker. And if you are interested, much of his work can be found over at nightattack.tv, and his political card game, The Contender, which we will be speaking quite a bit about today, can be found over at thecontender.us. Justin Robert Young, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, man! It is great to be here. I'm honored to be a part of this program and how many amazing people you've had on it.
Yeah, I've talked to your partner in crime, Brian Brushwood, on here.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to Tom Merritt on here. My personal friend Kyle Ferguson's been on here. A lot of podcasters, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business folk. Now I finally collected you into these little chats about
into these confines of knowledge.
Indeed. So you and I have been on many podcasts before, usually with a more comedic bend. But I'm actually gonna, try and talk to you like a professional about a very specific topic, and we'll do our best not to talk about things like wrestling or online card games.
Yeah, no promises.
Yeah.
My metaphors can get pretty specific.
Yes, they can. So can I, though. We'll see if we can't follow each other's. But we are going to talk about a card game today, specifically a paper one, and one that you had a hand in creating, the political card game, The Contender. And as I rattled off at the top of the show, folks can go to, and it's even on the overlay if you're watching, thecontender.us to find out more about the game. But you are here, so where did the idea for this come from?
Well, the idea for The Contender started when me and my co-creator, John Teasdale, and we were both working for a company called The Go Game, which does scavenger hunts effectively all over the country and the world. And so we were traveling a lot, and you kind of are constantly not only looking at game design, live action game design, but really what I thought was the most interesting about it in terms of an inspiration perspective was you saw the same things play tested repeatedly.
Okay.
So, let's say you're running a mission that we used to run in the Go game is Agent Hot Pants. And what you have to do is you are told that there's a girl at a bar that will only respond to outrageous compliments / pickup lines, depending on how risque you want the game to get, right? Depending on who your customer is.
So this was a plant by you guys?
Exactly. So we put a lady there, but we don't tell them what she looks like. So they have to go around the bar. It's like this social needle in a haystack. And it's a great mission. It is always a crowd pleaser, but you tend to start to understand once you've run it dozens, if not hundreds of times, how to optimize it. And it really got me into a very active kind of like playtesting sort of mindset. And same thing with John. And so we were talking about making a game. That was not the first game we made. The first game we made was a game called Who Does Nobody Like? And it was a ripoff of the game True Colors, which I guess we don't sell it anymore, so I can say that it's a ripoff of another game. But it was basically just like questions meant to ruin deep friendships. It was just this demonic little deck of awfulness. And we thought that was funny. We really liked working with each other. And so we came up with this idea for The Contender, which was essentially a way that you could gamify a presidential debate. And it leveraged where John was at in terms of the kind of game he wanted to make and my interest in politics in general. I'm kind of a political junkie, so this was just a natural opportunity. It was a totally different game until we ran into the third piece of our puzzle, which is our partners at Guts and Glory, the design firm out of Oakland, where we played the game with them, and they were like, "Listen, we're all on board and we want to do this, but we had this whole numbers mechanic to it, where it was like this rock paper scissor." This beats that, and we had number values on all of the cards, and they're like, yeah, I just want to read these funny quotes. These funny quotes are really where it's at. And so we totally redid the game, and it became what it is today, which is a natural language card game wherein you can argue with your friends using real presidential quotes without any improv. And that was kind of, I think, where we really wanted to get to and eventually did, is do a game where you could record it and then animate it without there being anybody necessarily having to say like, okay, was that 2 points? Is that 2 points or 4 points? Okay, cool. Like, it just sounds like a debate, and yet nobody has to make something up. So it's not just rewarding the extroverts. You know, it's almost funnier when the quiet person at your game says something wildly outrageous, especially if it's, you know, antagonistic towards somebody, and that's really what we were happy with in the result.
How did you come across Guts and Glory?
Well, as much as I've been known to, you know, be very critical of college as a concept, but I will have to say that so many of my, you know, very, very good friends obviously came from my time at Syracuse University, and a lot of business stuff, and including working with Meg. Meg was the one half of Guts and Glory. Meg and Fawn are the two, you know, chief, you know, people there. And I'd known Meg working with her at the newspaper in Syracuse, and we had just kind of kept in touch. And I was actually doing a Go game in Jack London Square in Oakland, and they randomly ran into me, and we set up a time for them to come over and play the game. They were absolutely in love with it, and you know, in a way, I'm glad it started with a friendship, because the journey we went on for the Contender was certainly filled with highs and lows, and I was glad to be able to connect with both initially Meg, and then of course Fawn as things went on, as friends as well as business partners, because would have been a lot harder if everybody I was working with wasn't a friend.
I can understand that. So you came up with your idea, you developed your game, you got in touch with actual game makers, and then play tested the game and brought it back to a simpler, kind of easier to pick up form. At what point during all of this did you realize, and did you decide that A, you needed to crowdfund it, and B, which crowdfunding platform you went with?
There really wasn't any question on either of them. Right now, the place to put a card game, even if you had it totally finished, is Kickstarter. Like, it's just not. It's the best retailer of games there is right now, you know, and there's really not even a close second, because, you know, Amazon can certainly, if you catch momentum there, can sustain something, but man, people just love to buy card games on Kickstarter, or tabletop games in general. Like, it's a boom time for that genre, and that is the premier destination to showcase it, especially for new people. And you know, we briefly thought about launching on something like Indiegogo. We actually wound up having a few connections there, but you know, at the end of the day, even if we did $1 million on Indiegogo, there would always be this question of, could we have done 5 million on Kickstarter? So I just had to. I don't think that was anything more than a perfunctory conversation on either sides of that.
Okay. Now, had you had any experience with crowdfunding in the past? Had you done a Kickstarter before the Contender?
We all had, actually. John had kickstarted another card game. Guts and Glory had, I forgot what they worked on a couple Kickstarters, actually. And then I kickstarted a podcast with Tom Merritt, who you know and do the Star Wars show with. He and I crowdfunded, I think, the first 3 seasons of the FSL, which is a very weird and quirky kind of podcast, but that was how we got money for it. And, you know, we had merch and everything. So I was aware of it, but certainly nothing on the scope of what we wound up doing with the Contender.
Okay. So that being said, I mean, I'm curious, what was your planning like for the Kickstarter? Because your original goal was 15,000.
Yeah.
You went far beyond that.
We did.
Was that always the goal? How much agency do you feel you had in kind of blowing the doors off your original goal?
I think a lot. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there were elements that we wound up launching this maybe a few months after Exploding Kittens, and and this might have been a troubling a prelude to disaster, but we were very confident about the product. We were very confident about how it would look, which is something that not a lot of first-time game makers can just pull in a world-class design team like we could with Guts and Glory. We felt that was a natural advantage for us. So part of us was like, you know what, maybe this just catches fire, and we wound up doing like 3 million. We hoped that we would get to our goal within the first 48 hours. And I think that is a good strategy if you have the right product, is to make the vast majority of the time you're raising money to be about happy times and not pressure times. Like you want to spend, it's easier to squeeze your friends and family to continue to talk if it's like, oh my God, look at this wild success that you could be a part of, and we have this stretch goal, instead of, well, I guess the world doesn't love me by $1,000. Maybe the world will love me eventually. Like, I think narratively that's important. And also, we just had a lot of wind at our back. We launched it at Nerdtacular, where you were, and
yes, I was there when you got the news that it funded, and I believe you took your shirt off and ran around the room cheering.
I like PD Pablo twirled it around my head like a helicopter, as I was very excited that we had got the money within. I mean, it was like within 12 hours. But part of it was also just that I was able to speak to a very qualified audience. Not only people that were there live at Nerdtacular, which is a couple hundred, right? But also everybody that was watching live on the internet. It was just kind of a perfect storm. And the fact that we exploded like that and had a good video and had a well-done site, that gets us pushed by Kickstarter themselves, and we get in their email, and, one thing leads to another, and we wind up kind of blowing through what our initial goals were. But we always knew if we had not blasted through our initial goals within 48 hours, we would have been very sad pandas.
So is there any certain keys you can kind of point to that if you were to give advice to other folks, that you'd like, okay, you should have this, that, and the other lined up before you hit launch? Or yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of this, you can read. We did a couple of Medium posts. The happiest of them of our comedy and tragedy drama faces is we made $142,000 on Kickstarter, and so can you. You can search for that on Medium, and in there we go through the biggest thing is if you really look at the most successful Kickstarters, at the point that they launched, there was so much work put into them. Like for us, the game was done. We had the game designed. We had, the test decks had already come in and everything, so we were playing with them in the game. We wound up having to write, I think, another 100 or so cards, but other than that, it was by and large kind of a finished product. So there's number one. Number two, the video's got to be on point. Like, the video's got to be good. Like, unless you really have something truly spectacular, like technically, like, I mean, like you're inventing a time travel machine, then yeah, you can just shoot yourself on your iPhone in your garage with your time machine. Otherwise, if you have a simpler kind of thing like us, like, listen, there's a million different card games, including, stuff like Exploding Kittens or Secret Hitler, where there's a lot of people that are way more famous in that scene that are going to do great pro videos because they got time and money.
Also, I'm just realizing how utterly insane some of these games sound out of context.
I know, yeah, but the fact that they're household names speaks to their success, and you have to play at their level. You have to do something that at least feels like you put effort into it, because
it's cheese. It's kind of cheesy, but I mean, having a high production value in your Kickstarter video, it's kind of the Kickstarter equivalent of dressing nice to your interview, right? It's like
perfect point.
You might not want
point.
to.
Yeah.
You might be the type of person that we're both from Florida. You might wear t-shirt, shorts, and sandals every day of your life, but you should probably dress a little nicer when you go in for your interview. And the same holds for your Kickstarter video. Like you said, unless you're just that much above all of the competition, you're just gonna have to do your legwork.
Well, and here's the other thing, and this is something that is big now and will only probably become more true, is that, you know, there was a joke that John and I had, and maybe one day we'll actually do it, but we wanted to run a Kickstarter for cheerful production delay emails. So, you know, it's become such a meme that you back a Kickstarter that you like, and then really your only experience with that product is to just get production delay emails. That it's just like, all right, guys, don't worry, we're doing this. We just got a thing from the factory, but don't worry, we're only going to be 6 months late. And that is a meme. It's funny, but at the same time, it's a very real issue where people get a bunch of money and then don't know how to do with it. Now, listen, we're going to get into all our financial follies in a second, but when it comes to raising money, you have to understand that like Garrett said, you know, it's about whether or not people can trust you to give them what you are offering. And those signals don't come through more clearly than did you take time and effort with your video, and did you take time and effort with your copy and your graphics on the page? Do you have misspellings in your listings? Like, this stuff is so important, because any little, you know, it only takes one hair in the soup to ruin lunch.
Very, very well put. So with that, because I've heard, and I feel you hear the sentiment all the time, that most of your time with your Kickstarter, most of the time you're going to spend, is going to be so incredibly heavily weighted towards preparing to launch it versus everything that happens after you launch it.
Well, it's like a boat. You know, you got to make sure that thing is seaworthy.
Yes.
And then once it's out to sea, you could steer it a little bit, but, you know, if it's got a hole in it, doesn't matter how hard you turn that wheel, you're still going to sink. And so, yeah, no, you like think about it as your boat, and you want it to go as far as you can onto the horizon. Yeah.
So let's talk about the post launching the Kickstarter. You funded you hit your goal of 15,000 rapidly. You're very happy about that. And then, as we already mentioned, you went on much further to accrue over $140,000 in backers on Kickstarter. And one of the things that piqued my interest is, like, you know, I really need to finally sit down with Justin and talk to him on the show about that. Is you mentioned him, your partner John Teasdale recently posted part 3 in a series of tell-alls that he's been doing over on Hacker Noon. About the Contender, and part 3 is titled "How We Turned $140,000 on Kickstarter into $40,000 in debt and How We Broke Even." And I didn't actually know that happened, and I'm personal friends with you until I read this.
Well, you know, it's in one part it's a fairly basic business story, and you know, it's something that I think a lot of people don't really understand a lot about. To be honest with you, that you know, a lot of this kind of like business element of it is stuff that you can very easily overlook. And when you're at the money level that we were at, making a few over optimistic yay team decisions wound us putting like fairly substantially behind the 8 ball, to the point where you know, we were basically stalled out for a fairly long time, far more than we were excited about. And it was really only, you know, through us just like trying to think our way out of it that we finally, you know, wound up hitting a switch that brought us back to profitability.
Okay. I mean, to talk about some of it. I mean, at what point do you feel that the dive into debt took place?
Oh, I remember it vividly, Garrett. So here's basically what happens. In the middle of the Kickstarter, which is launched in end of July, so it's now late August at the point that we are wrapping it up. People start asking, are we going to have the game by Christmas? Are we going to have the game by Christmas? Now, here's the first rookie mistake. It wasn't that I didn't know. Like, it's not like I guessed that we'd be able to get it too quickly, or we'd be able to get it afterward and we'd have to pay extra for it. I just didn't know. And we were kind of just getting out of like fundraiser mode and into production mode. And these were some of the questions that started to plague us. So all we had heard through our other experiences was how fickle Chinese production is, both in quality and in delivery. And specifically during the holiday season, you are effectively kind of like just throwing caution to the wind in trying to get something back at a certain time before the holidays, because like there's only so many spots for so many containers on so many ships. The Chinese government can stop shipping whenever they want. They can hold a boat because somebody's trying to put some crazy thing on a boat, and so they can just stop the entire boat so they can investigate for it. Like it is dicey as we understood it. So we wound up. Here's another thing about a successful Kickstarter. Man, does everybody come out of the woodwork to shield their business for you. Like, and friends.
I've only had an unsuccessful Kickstarter, and everyone came out of the woodwork to shield their business to me. Yeah, no, it is crazy. Like, and some friends, right? And some randos, and sometimes the products are good, and sometimes the products are garbage, and you got to be aware. So we wind up getting hooked up with a company in America whose name I'm not going to say because I don't know. I don't want to fight with them, but I eventually became very cross with this company. But well, can you kind of explain what the disconnect was without mentioning the company?
So here's what happened, and literally it was not necessarily their fault. It was our fault for not realizing that they were not really the partner for us. They were a very large multinational corporation, and they deal with people that are moving insane units. Like these are people that are anybody who has played a tabletop game or opened a pack of trading cards in their life have probably touched things that have come out of their factories. Oh, okay. They're huge. They're gigantic, right?
Yes.
We're not. We're very small. And they were not necessarily very receptive to how small and agile and on top of things we were. They were more used to dealing with people that were, doing very, very slow kind of revisions on massive, massive, massive orders. So our first problem was that looking at our sales momentum through Kickstarter and assuming that we had absolutely hit the jackpot because this election was going to be something very, very different, we're like, okay, this is perfect. Here's what we sold effectively every day on Kickstarter. If we were to hold 20% of that momentum coming out of it, we could get our price down on our American-made order, and we would all basically walk out with $150,000. And that was a beautiful idea that presupposed that we would keep 20% of our momentum. At the end of the day, we held about 4% of our momentum.
Okay.
And that is, I mean, even for a Florida public school graduate, I know that 4 isn't 20. And we found out the hard way that you know, we were very over optimistic, as we found wildly optimistic and overperforming is 8%, let alone 20.
So you didn't research it before you made the decision to make a large purchase based on a 20%.
Well,
figure?
I mean, you know, there's not really. The reason why we wrote all these articles is because there wasn't really a lot out there that kind of went over stuff like that. I mean, a lot of the numbers that we wound up finding, we heard kind of firsthand from people, and we'd reached out to a few, but you know, it's a little overwhelming especially when you're putting so much time and effort into the product itself, like to know who to network with and who's smart and who's good and who really knows their stuff. Like any other industry, you know, it takes time to sort of figure that out, and it's very easy, I think, to just say like, "Whoa, why didn't you look it up?" Because we did look it up. We look a lot of stuff. I mean, we were very, very smart on a lot of stuff. We were not so smart on this, and that's why we really wanted to write everything up like we did. Because for us, you know, even in a fairly mature world for funding on Kickstarter, you know, the answers just weren't there for us on that stuff specifically. And also, it's like, how do you factor into the fact that, you know, Donald Trump is running for president? Like, and this is a game that got a ton of press in the Kickstarter, and we assumed would continue to get press the further we went along because it was so timely, and the wind totally fell out of those sails too, because Kickstarter is just such a great news framing device. You know, it's urgency, it's timeliness. So people will cover you in a way that they won't cover you when you're just a product, because then it's just an ad.
Right.
You know, and if it's a Kickstarter thing, yeah, it's an ad, but for whatever reason, man, people love to write about Kickstarters.
Very true. So you overordered. You ended up about
big time
$40K in debt. How did you course correct? Because you did end up breaking even.
To be fair, we actually initially went in $60,000 in debt. We spent a lot of money. We recouped a little bit of that right off the top because we had expansions that you know, were part of the packages, but now we could sell, and expansions are higher profit margins for us. But really, the magic bullet happened at Gen Con, which is this gigantic card and board game convention in Indianapolis. We were told that the best way to sell games at Gen Con are to have exclusive packs, something that you can only buy at Gen Con.
Oh, okay. So
we made this, you know, 12-card TV and movie president expansion. And so we included quotes from famous TV and movie presidents. And so we sold those, and they did really well. We actually, like, Gen Con, if you are not a major player, it's very common that you lose money on Gen Con, but you gain connections. Mm-hmm. And we, you know, we wound up making money. And we weren't even on site. It was pretty good. But the end of the convention, we come back. We're really not any further along. We're a lot smarter than we were than when we went to Gen Con, and we made a little bit of money, but it wasn't a tremendous amount. And I find like 30 remaining TV and movie expansions. And so I decide to just make a listing on the site and send out an email saying that these are available to our mailing list. And they were all gone in like 40 minutes.
Wow.
It was crazy. People bought them, you know, crazy. And you know, these were $10. It was a $10 expansion for effectively 10 cards. You know, we will do a few bonus ones, but as soon as we did that, it was like, wow, we just made $1,000. That's pretty rad. We should keep doing that. And that was right about the time that Guts and Glory, they wound up going on a sabbatical. In our last meeting, we kind of charted out what we wanted to do from the 3 debates and election night and over the holidays. We kind of laid out everything. And, you know, at the end of the day, selling those expansions brought us back to profitability.
So you started focusing on your existing audience.
Yeah. Turns out, you know, and man, we did 1.5 million different things to try and stay, to try and get ourselves back into the public eye. Like, we did all these puppet videos. We went to these conventions, like, tried to do live streams, and you know, we did these like gimmicks of people taking pictures of themselves, like playing the game, so we could like have social media stuff. We wound up going to both Iowa and New Hampshire for the caucus and primary, but ultimately nothing really moved the needle. Like, here's a revolutionary idea. Talk to the people that already bought your game and see if they would like to buy more of it. It just totally changed the financial equation for us.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, because you, like you said, you can try so many different things, right? It's so easy, I think, to fall into the trap of focusing on finding new customers and making new sales. I mean, in your case, selling like a new base set, basically. But
yeah, well, and part of that was us kind of reframing what we were doing, because it's hard to not put all of your effort into moving base games.
Right. When
you are looking at thousands of base games sitting right in front of your face. Like, that's the natural thing that you want to do, is like, oh, well, let's make these viral videos they'll sell more base games. But, you know, at what expense? You know, we were at the point that Guts and Glory left, we were $17,000 in debt. And over that time period, through 3 debates and election night, we erased all of that, and we went into the black. And those were all based on selling the expansions and doing discounts during those times.
Wow.
And working the mailing list. I mean, the mailing list was the lifeblood for all of it.
Right. Well, I mean, would you? I mean, obviously, and I guess now in hindsight, would that have been, if you could go back, would that have been your plan all along?
Yeah, I certainly think, and we are going to do another one. We have another game that we'll probably launch next summer, probably at Nerdtacular. Same. I mean, why mess with success?
I'm excited to try it. That's when I got to play the Contender for the first time.
But that will certainly be more of it. I mean, and also now we know so much more about, like, you know, how to launch a game within the card game sphere, you know? Like, we just know, we know what we're doing in a way that we didn't know what we were doing before. So, yeah, I think the concept of base game, continuing expansions, and also very nimble expansions, I think that was also part of the selling point, was that we were doing expansions based on quotes that would happen. Like, we'd send out the email to say, buy our expansion based on tonight's debate, and get it in a week.
Wow.
You know, and
yeah,
that's powerful.
That's an abnormal turnaround time in tabletop.
Yeah, and because everything in tabletop seems to take forever, but we could exploit that a little bit, you know, because our game set up well for it. And, you know, I think going forward, especially with our next idea, I think we're going to be able to follow a similar model.
Well, I really appreciate you sitting here and telling your story to me, Justin. But I mean, before we end, is there any parting advice you would have for future crowdfunding hopefuls?
Always question your decision making when you are committing money to stuff. Like, there's a lot of, and I am so guilty of this, there is a lot of ability in art and creativity to just not focus on things so you can make another thing better. There's less of that in business. And you know, in art, in podcasting, in music, you can fairly easily make up for a mistake. In business, it is harder, you know, and you ultimately can kind of put a lot of stuff in jeopardy if you make those kind of wrong decisions. So it's like, agonize when money's involved is what I'm saying. Constantly rethink your assumptions, because once those decisions are made, you know, that train leaves the station.
Well said. Well, again, Justin, thank you. And anywhere else besides the Contender.us or nightattack.tv you would like to point folks to if they'd like to learn more about your game and the content you create?
I mean, don't just take my word for it. Read it yourself. That is our reviews on Amazon. So go ahead over to Amazon, check it out. We have a 5-star ranking. You know, we are very, very proud that people have reacted to the game as kindly as they have, especially for first-time creators at this level. So go ahead and check it out. The Contender on Amazon, thecontender.us, and of course the Medium articles are out there. So go ahead and check it out, or hit me up at Justin R. Young on Twitter. If you are going through a Kickstarter, a crowdfunding thing, I'm your friend. Let me know. I will talk to you, because there are people, Garrett. There are people for which are very popular card game and board game creators that, you know, I went out of my way and had friends introduce me to multiple times and sent them emails looking for advice, and I never got anything back. So now I am very sensitive to anybody emailing me. I will try my best to get back to you ASAP.
I've been there as well with other projects, but that's great to hear. Very, very kind of you, Justin. Well, thanks again for joining me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time.